I think I have a clue as to why many PUBG main game players and teams are leaving the scene. Now, when it comes time for comparing the main game of PUBG to PUBG Mobile, well, they might be going in two divergent paths out there. And also brought to us by Adam Fitch, some great revenue share numbers from 2019 for the main game of PUBG, which reveals some horrifying and very staggering numbers out there for all of you guys. Now, if you are curious as well for the future plans, all of this kind of coinciding to the 5-year plan also released by PUBG for their main game. And I feel the need to clarify that because when it comes time for PUBG Mobile and the PUBG main game, they are very, very separate things as of right now. Tencent most recently announcing a $5 million prize pool for PUBG Mobile for the year of 2020 alone. When it comes time for the 5-year plan for PUBG itself, well, a bit different. Actually kind of trying to avoid the franchise leagues. They'll have open format out there for many organizers and some lesser events, I would say, in terms of prize pools compared to mobile, and also open to both males and females, and trying to stick to the revenue share model, which we're going to talk about now from 2019, also revealed by Adam Fitch. His full details linked down below, guys, are some staggering numbers. So let's get into it. When you think about revenue share, you think about teams who enter these esports to try and support their players, and revenue share from items can be a pretty substantial thing, especially when it comes time for not necessarily an esport, that being Fortnite, their item shop, their creator codes. They make some very big amounts of money out there. Of course, when it comes time for their creators, you look towards in-game items for Rainbow Six Siege and Rocket League and the like. They all do that to support the teams, the organizations, and PUBG also does it, but maybe not necessarily to the high amounts that you are thinking of. So first off, let's actually target one of the first events out there, and that's going to be the Face It Global Summit, where 25% of sales, a standard number for PUBG events is 25% of sales going back to the attendees or the teams to be split amongst their players, which, by the way, no specifics were actually given for the event, although reports by several teams out there do state of the 25% given to the teams, each team actually receiving in the few thousands of dollars to be split amongst their entire team. It only gets worse, though, as we do go on. As we then go to the National PUBG League, numbers were actually given for this one, and pretty staggering as well, with apparently and supposedly Phase 2 receiving less than a total of $22,000 for the NA teams who did attend, which, by the way, the organizer splits, again, 25% of that, so each team receives, yes, just $335 and just over 90 cents. It does continue and get worse into Phase 3, as they do go on and dedicate one singular item to raise these funds for, again, 25% split, which, by the way, amounted to in Phase 3 less than $3,000 split amongst all the teams for a whopping $173.49 for your team. You can imagine if you're trying to compete for those prize pools, and especially for the revenue shares, these tinier events certainly do hurt all the teams who do attend, especially when you have a mass amount of teams trying to split a very, very small amount of money. It can get pretty bad. Now, when it comes time for the PUBG Global Championship, the big papa of all the events out there, they raise a lot of money when it comes time for this, a speculated amount of $8 million raised, which, by the way, 25% of that was actually given back into the prize pool. 25% of that was also distributed amongst the teams. Now, the math might be a bit confusing, but around $4 million was the total prize pool. So supposedly $8 million was raised. $2 million go back into that prize pool, which is a portion of the $4 million, and the remaining $2 million goes back to be split amongst all the teams out there, which pretty much becomes a popularity contest. Yes, if you are a lesser-known team in PUBG, this is why we see the likes of many teams leaving. It isn't fair. Yes, the competition itself gives a decent prize pool, but if you are a lesser-known team trying to be one of the many teams to attend the event, and all of a sudden it comes down to a giant $2 million prize pool to be split amongst teams based off revenue share generated, well, the smaller teams, they get fricked over, as a portion of the distribution is actually done by popularity votes of the PGC pick'ems. Much like CSGO has their major pick'ems, a portion of that money is actually given to the teams who are picked the most. Alongside that, though, the revenue share also split amongst the most popular teams in general. And I understand, yes, obviously, if you're a more popular team, many of the Asian teams, also the likes of teams you guys would know, TSM, FaZe Clan, Liquid amongst VC and others, yes, they generate the most revenue, so they should get a larger chunk, but the disparity here, it's extreme. I'll show you guys on screen as well. When you have one team in Angry Men making over $1 million of that $2 million distributed, and all of a sudden, besides them, you have, yes, FaZe Clan, Liquid, and TSM making decent amounts of money. You have one team who generates, yes, a large portion of revenue share. They are making over $1 million across their players, but then you have the bottom 15 teams all making $5,000 or less. That is such a huge disparity. You understand why teams like Ghost and Envy and others are questioning why they're even in the esport itself. And again, I understand when it comes time for raising that revenue to be distributed amongst the teams, your more popular teams, they raise more, but do they raise that much more? And if you're a team out there who is trying to make the global championship, shouldn't you be rewarded a bit more for making the biggest event you have? And again, I'm not probably the best judge of this, but it's certainly an obvious character to see of why a lesser known organization who still even can be a better team out there than most out there, it becomes a popularity contest to see who can actually make more from the revenue share than the actual tournament itself. I think revenue share is going to be a big thing, especially for the main game itself. If they do want to avoid franchise leagues, actually most often we see these skin shares or these sales splits done with franchised esports out there. We're not going to see it though. Apparently PUBG trying to avoid that franchise league model. If you're going to continue with revenue share splits though, you would assume that needs some sort of tweaking. Whether or not it's maybe even a higher prize pool for all teams competing, and of course a higher incentive to do better itself, there's almost too much incentive on being a popular organization instead of actually being a strong team here. And yes, there is a correlation to many of the top teams also being popular teams, but you have to realize when it comes time for trying to feed and bolster your younger teams, your lesser known teams who want to try and compete in the game in the future, you got to give them incentive as well. When you are going to the biggest event in its history, or biggest event of the year, every single year you compete there, and all of a sudden you're making $5,000 or less from the prize pool, another team out there is making $1 million or more, you got to understand why other teams out there are a bit upset by this model. I don't know what the future of PUBG is going to be. PUBG Mobile is certainly taking off as bigger organizations enter that esport. The disparity gap, though, when it comes time for prize pool distribution and skin sales of PUBG is unlike any other. Until next time, hope you guys all enjoy breaking down esports gaming news here every single day, all day long. Until then, take care.